Good morning. And welcome to the second day of this year's UCISA CISG-PCMG conference. We're not expecting any fire alarms today, so if the alarm does go off, please make your way out of the doors at the back of the room. The evacuation point is outside the building. Is it the train station or something just opposite? Please make sure your mobile phones are switched off. We've got to change the schedule this afternoon. One of the partner showcases from ClabCo should be titled Delivering a Student Portal Across Multiple Campuses in an International University, and that's at 2:15 this afternoon. We've also got the excellent exhibition downstairs. I don't know if you had a chance to go down yesterday and meet all of our exhibitors. We've got a really good selection this year, so make sure you pop down today at lunchtime. It's nice to see so many friends here from across the sector, and that's one of the benefits I've had from working with UCISA, a chance to meet new people from different institutions. And as Drew mentioned yesterday, one of the unique things about our sector is the fact that we're so keen to share our experiences. We're so keen to share which systems we're working with, which projects we've worked on, which projects are going well, which projects are going badly, and that's something very unique to our sector. But that relies on you guys to make friends at these sorts of events and to enable that sharing of knowledge. And it's lovely when you come to these events to catch up with old friends and say hello, have a drink at the bar tonight. But use this as an opportunity to make new friends, to extend that network a little bit further, to say hello to an institution that you've never reached out to before. We also heard from Sean Noel yesterday afternoon about some of the challenges facing the IT sector in HE, and we're going to look at a couple of those challenges this morning: Agile and, of course, GDPR. So our first session is from Rob Lambert. Rob started his career in software as a tester in 2001. In 2011, he joined New Voice Media with the remit to modernise the testing approach and bring in Agile. He quickly became engineering manager, where he helped to scale Agile, grow the development team from 8 to 100, reduce the release cycle from 14 months to 1 week, and to start to train the next generation of managers. Rob has an active blog and he's an author of several books. One of the books I noticed was The Employable Parent Brain, so I'm not sure whether that will be able to help me with my parent brain, so I'll have to have a read of that one. So I'll hand over to Rob.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Is everyone all right? Slightly hungover? No? Okay. Apparently this has been streamed live, so if you're wanted by the police or you're not supposed to be here, then now is a good time to leave. Okay, so I've got 3 kids. My kids always ask me, why do I do this? And I don't know why I do it, because it's actually quite nerve-wracking. But one thing I do like to do is always take a selfie from the stage of the audience. So I hope you don't mind, but if you could all sort of squeeze together to see if we can get into this picture. And I used to be a software tester, and it always works on a developer's machine. Is anyone else in here a software tester? Done testing? A few people? Yeah, okay. So after 3, maybe what we could do is we could say works on my machine, okay? And then we'll see if we can get a picture, okay? So I'm not going to get everyone in, unfortunately, so sorry about that, but let's go. So maybe 1, 2, 3, works on my machine. Beautiful, thank you so much. I show those pictures to my kids every time I finish a conference. So I'm going to talk to you today about releasing agility. So just a quick show of hands, how many people in here are project managers? Oh dear, okay, so I do apologize. I didn't quite expect that many project managers, so please don't get me after the break. But today I'm going to basically, hopefully, not destroy a Gantt chart too much, but I will talk to you about a different way of delivering software. Okay, so for years I did slow, boring, and ineffective software development. The problem was the companies I worked for relied on that slow, boring and ineffective software development to release their products. So it's no surprise then that actually we didn't ship our software very often. And the reason was because we were stuck in an idea that if we built a big plan and we just stuck to the plan relentlessly, then we would be able to release software and it would be good quality and it would meet what the customer expected. So as a software tester, this is what happened. We'd get the specification of distraction at the beginning of the project. Has anyone had one of those? The giant 500-page requirements document. Yes. And then I would go to my test case management system of doom and have a look at what test cases I could reuse to test the specification of distraction. And then I would make a plan to come up with the difference between the two. And this would be what we would spend our time doing as software testers. We'd have the spec that would say it would do X, Y, and Z, and we would have some test cases, and we would have a gap. And then what we would do is we would plan this. And we would use a simple calculation, because I knew how many testers I had, I knew how many test cases I needed to run. Therefore, all I had to do was work on the assumption that every software tester could complete 10 test cases per day, and that would give me the magical estimate I would take to my project team. So let's say, for example, I had 4,000 test cases, and I had 10 testers capable of doing 10 test cases per day. That would give me 40 days. But of course, no plan survives first contact with the enemy, so I would add some contingency. And I would go to my wonderful project managers, and I would say 48 days, and they would laugh. And they would say, really, for software testing? I tell you what, how about you just have it done by this date? So I would leave the room feeling ridiculed and wondering why I was even asked to estimate in the first place when the project team had already decided when the software was going to go out. So what the project team then did was put everybody's estimations or deadlines into one big, giant Gantt chart of devastation. And it would give us our release date, the day when we would ship this beauty into production. And then the fun would begin. So while the programmers started coding their stuff over here, the testers would start writing test cases and test plans that nobody wanted to read. Realizing that nobody actually really cared about software testing, we'd just crack on writing those test cases. But the programmers would take longer than expected to deliver due to shady estimates, technical debt, all sorts of new technology and various different things. And every day, the project managers would print out a new Gantt chart trying to shoehorn all of this delay into the release date. But the programmers would take ages and ages and ages, and they shoot through everybody's contingency in the project plan, and still no software to test. And there's a few people nodding. Does this sound like a common IT project? Yes. And so what we would do is we would sit there as testers saying, more, we want the software, we want the software. Then finally, eventually, we would get the software, and boom, it would explode. Cause a series of small fires, injuring several DevOps engineers. So we would throw the software back to the programmers with bug reports full of scorn, disappointment, and rude words. And the programmers would struggle to understand what was wrong because the code that was broken was written here on day one, and it has all of this other code on top of it. And nobody can understand why it was written in that way in the first place. It doesn't help that that programmer has since left the business. So delays would mount, and the deadline was getting closer and closer and closer. And now delivering against the plan was our only goal. It didn't matter the quality, it didn't matter whether we had the right features, we just had to hit the deadline. So the management did the only thing they know how to do. They bought everybody pizza and drinks and asked them to work the evenings and weekends. Oh, a few people resonating with that one. And then somebody somewhere finally, eventually, in some sort of management back office would decide to ship the software even though we told them we're only 87% complete. And the software would go out the door and it would come back from customers who now hated us because it didn't do what it was expected to do. And we would go on and on and on through this backwards and forwards between testing and development and change requests and requirements and brand new printed Gantt charts on the wall every day. And everybody would be going crazy till eventually, finally, at last, we would ship this monstrosity into production. And it very rarely met what the customer requested. This is what the customer wanted. And this, by the way, is the Sky Tower in Poland, if you've ever been there. And this is what we delivered. And at the end of that session, at the end of this big project, at the end of all of that, we take a few days off and then we come back and we do what we call a sunset review, or a drains up, or a knees up, or any of these different terms to basically all of us get into a room and say what went well and what didn't go so well. And in that session, somebody would always say that our software delivery was slow. I cannot believe it took so long to ship the software. And somebody would also say it's boring. I don't mind helping out with software testing. I don't mind helping out delivery, but it's really boring. And somebody else would say it's ineffective. We have all of these clever people, and this is the best that we can do. And after that, we take a few days off to reflect, and we'd come back and we say, we're never going to do another project like that. And the following week, we'd start another project in exactly the same way. But it doesn't have to be like that. I'm here today to talk to you about how we did something very, very different. So I always get asked, why don't you like these big releases, these Gantt charts of devastation? And there's a few reasons. In fact, there's a lot of very good reasons, but there's three very, very big reasons why I personally don't like them. Number one, if you work in an industry where things change rapidly, then your release process must also keep up with demand, because if yours doesn't, somebody else's will. Now, obviously, I'm in the commercial world, and the higher education, from what I was talking to people yesterday, is the same thing. You're vying for students to come to universities and study and all the other stuff that goes with it. So there are other universities, there are other departments and teams building stuff faster than you can. This is a very good reason to improve the way that we deliver IT projects. Number two, major releases made us sad. This is Kevin Harris. He was a software tester in my team, and as you can see, he's quite sad. And he's sad for two reasons. Reason number one is that all of this big change, all of these Gantt charts, all of this delivery, all of this code suggests risk. There's change there. The more change we put into production, the more chance we have of breaking something. The second reason is if you only ever release once a year, once every 6 months, once every 2 years, that release process itself becomes incredibly difficult because you don't do it very often. Whereas when you release every day, when you release every week, when you release every month, it just becomes a standard operating procedure. We don't like change. Nobody likes working weekends to patch stuff that doesn't work. Neither do our customers. And reason number three, is anyone familiar with Taiichi Ohno, the guy that invented the Toyota production system? Yeah? So we bring in a lot of stuff from that system into our IT worlds. We talk about lean development, we talk about agile and all this systems thinking and what have you. It's all very useful, but his only goal when building the Toyota production system was to shortcut from when a customer ordered a car to when they got paid. And that's exactly what we're looking for in software development. Might not be getting paid, it might be trialing a new feature, getting some feedback on something, but we're talking about the ultimate feedback loop. This is what we tried to achieve. From the moment we build something, we measure it, we get value from it, and then we learn from that, and we can iterate around. So there are three really good reasons why I like Agile. So how do we release agility? So this is it. This is what you're all here, hopefully, to learn. Okay? It's these two things. Is one, you build strong foundations in your team. And then number two is you iterate and you adapt. And with that, I thank you very much, and I am off. I'm only joking. There is more to it than that, okay? So how do we do that? It's simple. Just build strong foundations and then adapt and iterate. So just a quick show of hands. Who in here is doing Agile? Wow, cool. Who's thinking about doing Agile? Excellent. Who has no idea what Agile is? Okay, good. Excellent. So, in my view, agility is not about test-driven development. It's not about DevOps. It's not about any of these things. Agility is about a mindset. It's about a cultural shift. And there's only really, I think, two ways to do management. One is the top one. People are costs to be managed and controlled, and we need to do more with less. Does anyone here have to do more with less? Yes. I subscribe to option number two, and this is what I think agility stems from. It's that people are the engine of the success. They're not costs. They do cost money, but they are the engine of the success. And then point two is only if they work in a system that supports them. Has anyone ever seen a high-performing individual fail because of the system that surrounds them? Yes. Okay, so Here are the 10 steps to releasing agility. The first 5 are really about individuals. The second 5 are really about management, okay? And this is why I focus so heavily on management when it comes to agile transitions. So let's crack on. Is everyone ready for that? Good. Is it always like this, or is it just early morning and waiting for the coffee to kick in? Okay, so what is the purpose? Does everybody here put your hand up in the air if you know what the purpose of your department is? Wow, cool, about half. Okay, so without a purpose, it's very, very, very difficult to describe where you're trying to get to. So what is the purpose of the team and the organization? What is the organization's mission? This is what individuals need to know to achieve agility. What are the values and what problems exist? So what problem is Agile trying to solve? I go into a number of companies and they want to go Agile, but they have no reason for it other than everyone else is doing it. Okay, so it has to solve a problem, and that problem has to be clear to everybody who works in the team. Number 2, what's expected of me as an individual in this team? Okay, so how do management expect, what do they expect from me? How am I contributing to the success of the business? This is what every employee wants to know. Okay, from a management perspective, what does this look like? Well, we started implementing objectives. Management through behaviors only. So Agile is about a set of habits and behaviors, and management must manage against behaviors, not what people say they can do, but what people actually do. And we start giving people feedback. So when people did things that didn't align with where Agile wanted us to go, we would give them feedback. And this is very, very hard. And this is why most Agile implementations fail, because managers aren't strong enough to give people negative or positive feedback. So another quick show of hands, who in here has received negative feedback from their manager about a behavior that they needed to address? Good. A few people. Great. So number 3, how do I progress in my career? Again, everybody wants to know this, and Agile is fundamentally built on people having a clear understanding of what role they play in a team. So how am I going to grow in my career? What opportunities are available to me? Clarity over career progression. Clarity over how project managers or business analysts fit into Agile. How does that career transition happen? Coaching plans, conference trips, personal development. You're all here at a conference. This is great. Agile is about learning. It's about learning your way to success. And managers who always ask for more. Is this all making sense? Good. Excellent. So how am I measured? So how do I know I'm doing a good job? As an individual, as a team, how are we measuring it? So most people ask me, how do you measure agility? And there's only really one measure that makes sense, and that's cycle time. And that's the cycle time between coming up with an idea, coming up with a feature, and getting it into production. That's the only measure that makes sense, and it doesn't matter what that measure is, as long as every single week or month you're trying to make it better. So velocity is interesting, feedback, all the other stuff, go for it if it's helpful, but cycle time is the one measure that gets you orientated to shrinking those release cycles, and that's all agility is. So clear visibility, roadmaps, management feedback, we talked about some of that stuff. So who's going to help me? Okay, so who's going to help me if I get stuck in this Agile transition? We had communities of interest, we started doing show and tells. So raise collective consciousness. What happens sometimes with IT projects is people have no idea what other departments do. And when they have no idea what other departments do, then you start to get criticisms, you start to get people debating the usefulness of certain departments, and then you start to get all sorts of very negative behaviors. Collective consciousness is about raising everybody's awareness of what everybody does as part of that release process. And if you find that somebody actually has nothing to do with it and doesn't add any value, then that's a tough decision for your management teams to make. Okay, so shine a light on great work. There's no point documenting how good stuff is. If people are doing agility really well in your organization, take other people to them, sit them down and let them see agility for themselves. It's very difficult to read something, implement it. It's easier to see somebody who's having success. And too much money, and you'll be pleased to hear this, no doubt, judging by some of the conversations I had last night, but too much money can actually hinder agility. So in the organization I was in, we had hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars invested, and it became just throw people at it, okay? That's not a solution to agility. Agility is actually better when you learn your way through it, and you don't learn if you have too much money. And I'm sure you're all, a few people going, yes, this is good, okay. So by the way, last time I was on a stage like this, I did fall off it. And I did injure several people on the front row, but thankfully there's only really you two there, so I'll move over here. It's fine. So these following 5, these belong to management. If you're a manager, a team lead, you have any influence at all in the organization from a managerial perspective, then the following 5 are all about you. This is where you get agility from. So the first 5 are about giving people clarity. How am I measured? What am I doing? What's the point of me being here? How am I going to be successful? And who's going to help me? These are things every employee strives to have. The following 5 are all about the system. Okay? So number 6, people need a plan too. So tactics and strategy at Agile are enough. Who's doing DevOps? A few people. Who's doing test-driven development? Who's doing continuous integration? Who's doing all of those good buzzwords? Great. That's not agility. Okay, they're just tactics. They work. I've managed to implement Agile in HR where you don't do any of that stuff, but you can still have the benefits of Agile. They're just tactics. But in order to achieve those tactics, your people need a plan. So there's no point just going, we're going to roll agility out, we're going to go Agile, and then not train people, not coach people, not help people understand how they fit into that. That is a management activity. You can just throw people into a pot and say, go for it, let's get Agile, here are some values and principles, blah, 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 but it won't work unless you're hands-on, coaching, helping, educating, training people in agility. So invest in management training as well, because managers make or break Agile implementations. If you're struggling with Agile at the moment, the chances are it is a management problem, not a people problem. A few people giggling at that, so maybe that's true. So truly care about your teams. If you don't care about people, don't become a manager. It's as simple as that. Anyone in here have a manager that they feel doesn't care about them? Ooh, a few people being very careful and looking at their bosses. This is good. But basically, if you don't care about people, don't be a manager. You have to care about the people who you are kind of working with, otherwise what's the point? Okay, so focus on behaviors is what people do that matters. We've talked about that. And only release agility at a pace where people can keep up. This is why I talk about releasing agility. You can't buy agility. You can't force agility. You can hire all the consultants in the world. But if your business is not ready to cope and release the agility at the pace that's sustainable for you and your customers, then you will fail and it'll be very expensive. So pull levers of cooperation. So we're not talking about collaboration. That's a big word in the Agile community. But collaborating means that we work together and we like each other and we give in and we give and take, and I'm going to drop this and you can drop that and maybe we can work together. Sometimes that's not the best thing to do. You end up with substandard results. We're not talking about coordination. That's a Gantt chart of coordinating people into sequences. We are talking about pulling levers of cooperation. Now, you don't actually have to like the people you cooperate with, okay? But you should be cooperating. And this is what managers do. They pull levers that force cooperation to happen so that results can be achieved. So, when we talk about DevOps, and a few people last night were talking about DevOps, it's nothing more than mashing together dev and ops, okay? That's as simple as it is, and that requires cooperation. Okay, but if you haven't mashed together dev and test yet, then don't try and mash together dev and ops because you're not quite there. Okay, but these are pull levers of cooperation. This is what managers need to do. Okay, number 7, hire and retain the best people. Now, I've been speaking to a few recruitment consultants who were here yesterday, and this is what they specialize in, hopefully finding the best people you can. But the best people have options. And this is one thing we found. If you want to hire the best people, they will always have options of different companies. So the best people like working with the best people. It's one of those things. If you hire good people, you generally attract other good people. If you hire substandard people, you generally attract substandard people. This is one of the easiest things as a manager to get right. So it's strategic to hire the best people. Because if you hire the best people, you can leave them alone. If you hire the wrong people, you'll spend your entire life managing those people. Okay, so improve the recruitment process, make it hard to get a job. This is one thing we did. We made it brutally hard to get a job in our organization. You had to go through about 5 or 6 hours worth of coding in your own time to even get an interview. Then when you got an interview, you had to extend the code that you'd written to make sure you hadn't got your mate to write it. So you're there with one of our developers having to write some tests, and then you'd have an interview with at least 6 or 7 people, and if any one of those people said no, you would not get a job. The harder you make it to get a job, the more people want to work there. It's a counterintuitive truth. So, develop good systems and habits. And this is where we really talk about the implementation of Agile. We're talking about test-driven development. We're talking about continuous integration. We're talking about all of the habits and tactics that make Agile. This is mashing together people. So processes and systems are 90% of the success. So has anyone heard of Edward Deming? Yeah? So I think Deming said it was actually 95% of the success of an organization is the system. The 5% is the people. Yet most managers spend 95% of their time working on the people. It's the wrong way around. I genuinely believe that if you have a very successful system, anyone can work in it. But in order to get a good system, you have to have good people. And this is all about process improvement. This is about if it hurts, keep doing it, because you'll find a way to solve it. This is about doing 5 whys on anything that goes wrong so you make sure it never happens again. This is about getting people cooperating and working together to release the software as fast as possible. So improving the systems is the job of management. If you're a manager and you're not improving the world of work for the people that work for you, you're not doing your job. TDD, acceptance test-driven development, DevOps, continuous integration, this is where we focus on this. But there's no point focusing on these tactics if you don't have strong foundations, you don't have good management, and you don't have the right people, because the chances are you'll probably struggle. So, number 9, and I'm going to rattle on here and hopefully give you 10, 15 minutes for questions. If there aren't any, then we can declare victory and, that's it. It's all good. So, technology, and hopefully this isn't going to offend everyone in this room, but technology does not solve problems. In most cases, technology makes problems worse. And a few people nodding sagely. So, unfortunately, we like shiny new things, particularly people that work in tech. And so we go, oh, here's a solution. Here is an online platform. Here's a cloud provider. Here's a CRM system that's going to solve all of our problems. The problem is we haven't truly understood our problems, and we haven't fixed our problems. So all that technology does is make those problems faster into the system. It propagates them deeper. It makes them harder to solve. And all you're doing is pushing failure around the system at a rate that you couldn't do without the system. Okay? So you must improve the process first before you buy the software or implement the software. Technology is good for supporting human endeavors. It is not a solution to 99% of the problems in business. Almost every problem I've ever encountered in the world of work has been a people communication problem. Okay? So be very careful. 3 rules to it. Number 1 is identify the problem first. Number 2, fix the problem with associated measures. And then number 3, once you're happy that everything's working as it should do, bring in IT. But don't go for IT first, because IT will always have a solution to problems that you probably don't understand. And neither do they. Okay? And number 10, finally, treat people like people. This is the tenet of Agile. Agile is all about people working well with each other and people feeling trusted with the freedom to get the job done. Command and control does not lead to agility. The more that you try to manage costs, the more your costs will go up. The more that you try to control people, the less control you will actually have. These are counterintuitive truths. No carrot and sticks needed, no humiliation-based management. Oh, that is awful, humiliating people in public. This is not the key to agility. Agile is all about a safe place to try things, to experiment, to get feedback, and to iterate furiously on what works, and to stop doing what doesn't. If you have command and control, if you have humiliation-based management, nobody's going to try anything new, because you're going to get hit with a stick. Okay? And treat people like people. Give them a bright future they can believe in. Ask them for more all the time, because that's what managers should do. Give them feedback when they do something that's substandard or not quite right. And Agile will be released at a rate that makes sense for you. Everyone happy? There's a few people nodding, a few people like, I don't know. Okay. Don't rush. The problem most people have when they go for Agile is they want to buy it off the shelf. We need to be Agile next week. In my experience, when I joined New Voice Media, we were releasing software every 14 months. And it took us about 1.5 years until we got it to monthly. And then it took us about another year to get it from monthly to weekly. This is the timescale of most Agile transitions, but yet most managers, most IT directors, most buyers of that service expect it tomorrow. It does not happen like that. So don't rush it. I don't know how you'd argue with your IT directors and those, that's up to you with your own personal skills and how to argue against budgets and constraints, but don't rush it, because when you rush it, you'll have the opposite behaviors of what you're trying to achieve. So they're the 10 elements of releasing agility. The first 5 are all about the people. The final 5 are all about management. And this one here, develop good systems and habits, is all about the tactics. Don't get hung up on that, because if all you do is focus on the systems and habits, you will ignore the rest and you will never succeed. So with that, we've got about 10 minutes of questions. We can jump into some technical stuff, or we could talk about this. It's over to you guys. Thank you, by the way.
So thank you, Rob. That was really interesting. Have we got some questions?
Got a question down here?
Hi, Robert. Hi, thank
Hi.
you. I'm Kevin Kudemans, Canterbury Christ University. We are just beginning with working Agile. One of the biggest challenges we've got, and I want to see what your opinion on it is, we are starting with 1 or 2 teams working Agile, but the rest of our world isn't working Agile yet. How do you cope with the challenges in different time frames and delivery times?
Okay, yeah, it's probably the best way of doing it, I'll be honest. So if you have, like, let's say you've got several different teams, or 300-400 people, start small. I would always start with one team trying to do it really well. Now the problem is you may then have to adapt to the release cycles of a big Gantt chart or a big release process, and that's fine, because what you want to try and do is test that people can work together, deliver small increments. So one of the projects I used to work on many, many years ago was for a bank, and they refused to accept Agile. But we said, we're going to do it in our own way. We're going to build small, self-contained teams that do all the right things. And we'll just slot into all of the release cadence for the rest of the organization. And over time, when we started convincing them to come to our show and tells every week and see the software, they really bought into it. And I think that's the key thing, is to find the stakeholders, find the people who have the levers to pull at an organizational level, and get them involved in the process so that they can see that what you're doing is releasing software. You're getting feedback, and you actually, my experience, let's say you've got 100 requirements, at the end, when you're really liaising with the customer, you'll probably only implement a third of those. And the customer will be happy that the other 2/3 never get done, because they didn't want them in the first place. If you go to somebody and say, tell me what you want for £100,000, they'll give you everything they want. The reality is they probably only want 1 or 2 things. So I think starting small, finding those stakeholders, negotiating, getting them in so that they can pull those levers of cooperation at a bigger picture. And this is all about shining the light on good work. So if you're doing good work, you're iterating furiously, you're getting feedback, and you're releasing software, even if it's just internally to deal with the other deadlines, then people will see that, and that's about shining people towards that and saying, this is what Agile looks like. And then eventually you will see the ripple effect go across the rest of the organization. And the other thing is, don't try and influence departments outside of technology. I've tried that, doesn't work. The only way you can do that is be actually in charge of it, which is why I moved into HR, and I did the same thing in HR. But in finance, we would never make that work. So just focus on tech, focus on the small teams like you're doing, and keep improving. And eventually, hopefully, you'll find someone that can pull a lever and get everybody cooperating towards that.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Yes, thank
Great. Thank you for the question. Any more questions?
So I have a question, Rob.
I said,
Have we got
just 1 minute, if we just do this question here, and then we'll pop over.
Hi there, Tony McAndrew from King's College, London. I like your 10 elements of releasing agility. They seem very good, but I'm not sure they're specific to agility. It seemed good management practice, whatever your environment.
You're absolutely spot on, yeah. So management's very philosophical. So, you could have, there's probably 50,000 different ways to do management. This here is very specific to what I have done in an Agile team. I've done it in HR as well. But the reality is this exists in any team that you wanted to. If you do this in any team, you'll see remarkable results. Because essentially what you're doing is hiring the right people, giving them a lofty goal or ambition to head towards, and then leaving them to find out how to deliver it. And if you have the right people, that'll work in any industry. So, yeah. I do another talk called 10 Behaviors of Effective Employees, and again, all 10 of those are translatable into any industry. So, yeah. This talk, usually, the first half of it's the same, and then there's 2 diversions. One is cultural, which is what this one's about, and then the other one's technical. And, it's always a decision between which one to present at conferences. So, but yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So,
I think we've got another one there. So.
Hi, yeah. You tend to think about this in terms of software development, but you mentioned that you've used this in HR, and I'm assuming you mean by that in terms of business process. Could you give us a quick example of somewhere where you've applied this outside of software development then?
yeah, absolutely. So when I sort of took over the engagement and enablement function in HR, it's all about, again, setting those, what do we believe in? What is our mission, vision, purpose, values? That's the stuff that people think is quite fluffy, but actually that's what keeps people engaged when the work gets hard. When it gets tough, it's like, why are we doing this? Oh, this is why we're doing it. We can go through this. And so what we did was we rolled out an online learning platform. As it happened, it was LinkedIn. And we did that very small increments. So it was all about, let's get a small group of users in, let's iterate furiously, let's get feedback before we just announce, hey everybody, here's a new platform for us to use. Because we had teething problems, like all projects. You have to get that feedback, otherwise you don't know whether or not you're delivering the right thing. You might want to launch it to 1,000 people in the organization, but good luck and enjoy the PR if that all falls flat on its face. So that's one of the things we did. Also stuff, every project was literally just a giant epic that we broke down into small increments, and we prioritized it against all the other projects that were in play at the same time. And Kanban board, moving things through, daily stand-ups. What are we doing today? We're doing exit interviews. We'll do this, we'll do that, and that's Agile. Yeah, no TDD, no CI, none of that stuff. They're just tactics. Okay.
So I guess my question was, how do we get that initial buy-in from the business to fill that product owner role where we have that one person that can make the decision on what's most important, because in our institutions we're quite used to it not being one person but potentially a committee of people?
Yeah, that's hard. That's hard. So when I joined New Voice Media, we had a product owner who kept the specification of distraction, as we called it, in Adobe PDF, so you can edit it with a password protected on a server that no one had access to, And it was about prizing that away from the people that think they have that control, and still giving them the control. I mean, essentially, if you have a product team and they want to maintain control, all we're saying here is you have 1,000 requirements that you want built. All we're saying to you is prioritize the top 5. And we will work on the top 5, and then we will show you the top 5 as we're working on them. In the meantime, you can be prioritizing the next 5. So we're not taking away control from anyone. All we're doing is suggesting that instead of trying to deliver all 100 or whatever in one big block, we're going to pick 1 or 2, and we'll deliver them in the next 2 weeks or next 3 weeks. And it will take a long time for people to see the value in that. But there's an economical value to this as well. So going all the way back to essentially what Taiichi Ohno tried to do with Toyota is this. This is what we are trying to achieve. We are trying to say we have 10 features, and surely if the product team have done their job correctly, they know how to measure the return on investment on those features. If you don't, then why are you building it? So we need to understand that if we have 10 features and each one, let's say for example, releases £100 worth of revenue or business value, then surely if we can release one, then we can see that £100 quicker. And then we can release another one, rather than waiting, and then hopefully releasing £1,000 of value at the end. So there's an economical reason for it. There's also, the problem is when you're doing this is you're locking in all sorts of assumptions. You're locking in ignorance to the technical implications of building something, because until you start writing the code, you don't really know how this thing's going to hang together. Same with rolling out a system. And that's what we try to do as well, is minimize the complexity that's involved by doing one thing at a time. Next thing. And it'll take you a while to get there, but eventually you'll see things flowing through, and that's what we call Kanban, which is essentially we're just going to pull the next work item, throw it through, and in the glory days at New Voice Media in the last year, just before I sort of quit and set up on my own, we were able to take a story in on a Monday, for example, and have it in production by Friday. And that's good. That's powerful. It's very, very powerful for salespeople. They love it. And they'll start selling stuff you haven't got, which is a downside. So, there's pros and cons to all of these.
Thank you.
Yeah. We've got time for one last question, I think.
James Farnhill from University of Warwick. You saw a lot of hands from project managers at the start there, and you said, project managers, BAs, where do you fit into Agile? Where do project managers fit into Agile? Because sometimes when I talk with development teams, you know, you get the whole thing that you said originally, you know, our project manager there to beat us over the head. We're going to do Agile because we don't need any project managers anymore. So where they fit in? What role do they have?
It's an interesting question. I shall try to be as diplomatic as possible. It depends on how big your department is. So if you've only got 2 development teams or 2 IT teams that are quite small, you probably don't need a project management function. However, the bigger you get, what you need is that overarching project management framework that sits across and organizes and cooperates and coordinates all of that work together. So you need cooperation within the teams and across the teams, but you do still need that project management tier above holding, you could call it program management in a sense. That's the way it moves to. Business analysts, in my experience, typically move into the product owner roles. It's the same role, you call it whatever you want. They're basically defining the product and then feeding that into development teams. Project management does become a little harder to do because you're essentially, you're bridging the gap between the customer and management expectations and the development teams. But until you get to a certain size, there can be not a lot to do in that environment. So it is a difficult role to transition from if you're in a small environment. A big one, you'll probably still find a niche to be able to do that. And you know, a lot of project managers move into becoming a Scrum Master. You have to be very careful with that role because Scrum Master is all about improving the process. It's not about managing work. And so you find a lot of project managers that have sat the Scrum Master certification and they have no idea how to do Agile. All they've done is sat a certification and they can answer a few random questions. So project management's a great skill. It's a brilliant skill to have. And you may find that actually that moves into more of a management, business analyst, overseeing the program kind of level. It's a controversial question because you know, until you get to a certain size, there probably is not a lot of need for project managers. Yeah, which is sad, but you know, the reality is it's time to reskill, it's time to learn something new, project, Scrum Master, or find somewhere that's big enough to house a project function as well. Yeah, but every company is different, so yeah. I've got one last question, I think, and then...
Squeeze one in real quick.
James Spreadbury, University of Bath. You've talked about an environment where you've got hundreds of developers that you can deploy on things, and that's not going to be our experience so much. And one of the problems that I keep coming up against, which I'd be interested in your view on, is actually around project justification. But if you work in a culture which is used to waterfall type projects, a lot of the time you've got system owners who think, if I don't specify everything up front and say about all the requirements that I want, I'm not going to get enough resource on this project. And once the organisation says, right, you've had your resource, I'm not going to get any more. So have you got any tips for just getting the organisation sort of past that point where it can sort of just release the resource management a bit to make things more fluid?
Yeah, maybe during the break, if you want to grab me, we can talk about this in depth. I'm conscious I'm using the next presenter's time, which is always a faux pas to do. But generally speaking, you need to get rid of thinking about that detail. So that detail is best left for those that are trying to implement it. And the switch moves from having to define all of the requirements in the specification to essentially get estimates. That's what you're trying to do, to put together a prediction of costs. And to try and move to actually putting a return on investment on why we are even doing the project in the first place. So most valuable levers of control and change are at a level way above the development or IT function. They're at the management, buyers, directors level of saying, if we implement this set of features, which may take 6 months, it may take a year, we will have this return on it. And if we can quantify that, which is actually almost impossible and very hard for people to do, but that's where the value has to shift to, and the numbers and metrics need to be a higher level than development. And that's about getting together with people, cooperating and trying to work out how you can quantify that CRM X versus CRM Z is the better option. And then when you come to implement it, then hopefully you're not going to be too far off with your rough guess as to how big this project could be. But maybe in the break we'll go through some strategies I use with one of the banks, and if you're interested. Okay? But yeah, the problem is the IT teams try to quantify it themselves, and the reality is it sits at a business level probably above that to work out whether we should even be doing this in the first place. Yeah. Okay, so thank you everyone. That's the time up. I'm available here in the break, but I will be leaving around about 11:30, 11:45. So if you've got any questions, you want to have a chat, come and grab me at break time. So thank you everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.